how can we make this place be all that it can potentially be in Knott County in the 21st century? We have relied on our history for a long time. It's been a great thing for us to be able to do, but there's more we can do now, and we've got to think that way. And so we together really believe that that's kind of the direction for us to head next. The last opportunity is for you to provide feedback to us. So I'm going to invite Amy back up in order to facilitate that time. And when she's finished, I'll just have a couple more words, and then we'll let you go for the night. But thank you for your attention.
So for some of you, it might be like, oh, okay, this is a lot about them. But that is really, that is to make the organization more effective and to be there for the community in the long run. So to be able to deliver on the programs and services. So I really would like to, if there are any questions, open it up for that. But to get feedback on this. But one of the things I probably should have done in the very beginning is first of all, stand up. We've been sitting for a little bit of time. And I stood up, and it felt better already. If you're, we'll take pity. If you're a board member of Hindman Settlement School, either presently or past, go ahead and sit down. All right. Staff member, go ahead and sit down. Oh, boy, big contingency there. Oh, man. When did you sneak in? You missed a good dinner. Let's see, what else do we have? We've got, well, you were already sitting down. So. Kids, the kids can sit down. If you're a kid, you can sit down. I don't know, community member. So tell me what box you're still in. You're a wider community member, or well, who's left standing? Go ahead.
I'm Chris from Rural Appalachia at Bree College.
Okay, so you're wider community, and Jeff?
Executive Director at Pine Mountain Settlement School down in Harlan County.
Colleagues here? Tom?
Tom Hoskin, Lexington, Kentucky. I'm a friend.
A friend, good. We got friends too. So nobody else was a friend, so I like that category. A friend category. Well, good. At least there's some mixture. That's nice to see that we had a good mixture of that. So good. So you got to stand up, so that helped. So do I have any questions, or if you had just wanted to pass things, okay, Robert? And if you had just a card you wanted to pass up, that's fine too.
I thought this was a very inspiring presentation, and when I think about Hindman, I can't help but think about the settlement school along with the Artisan Center, the Kentucky School of Craft, the setting. I mean, it's a whole ecosystem of creative and cultural wealth. And so I just wondered if there was much discussion in the strategic planning process about networking and sort of raising all these boats at once, because I think the energy that you've exemplified in your plan is powerful, but I think it would be even more powerful with synergies established with these other organizations.
Yeah. I don't know if you came in to get that question, let me talk about that. That is actually really a very important part for two reasons. One is that the recognition that these problems that Eastern Kentucky is facing, you can't do it yourself. And so this is actually one of the biggest reasons why this value of relationships and collaboration was raised as, I mean, it's not just a feel-good thing, it's like this is our most important thing. We can't do it ourselves. And it's not just the collaboration, but realizing this place has to be, it is, as you said, I like that word, of an ecosystem. You want people to come for all of it. And working, go ahead.
Yeah, just the phrase that jumped up at me is we're all in it together. And the more we recognize that, I feel like the stronger we're all. And I realize that it's important to have a strategic plan for this institution, but I would even go broader than just Hindman, the whole crescent, from Whitesburg up to Hazard and even in other directions too. I mean, we're really in this together, and what you're articulating is a vision that resonates on many, many levels.
Yeah. I think, where's Brett? I think there was definitely, in the talking a lot around the cultural heritage, that came out very clearly on that. Is Brett around?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that, but it's taking a little bit wider the sense of, the original idea with the community school, the settlement school was learning from one another. And it's not just the settlement school itself. In the past, and when they came, it was the settlement school and the community. And now there are other actors there that can be part of that learning from one another. So I don't know, Brett, if you wanted to speak to that.
I completely agree with you, and I feel like that we're more and more understanding how the three pieces. We've always kind of been involved with each other's work and with each other's even organizational administration and everything else, but we're understanding more and more how the work fits together and how Hindman works as a whole, to the point where this here in a couple of days we'll all be loading into a van, about 7 of us from Hindman, and going to Appalachian Studies Association conference and presenting on the overall kind of work of Hindman. And so we're starting to understand that ourselves as well.
I mean, to me, that's part of the branding.
No, it's a great point. And one of the things that struck me, again, if you have questions, what really, really struck me was reading the history of Hindman Settlement School. And it came out, I think one of the board members that's not locally here either said, aren't we just kind of going back to where we were? And when the settlement school were first established, it was because of economic transition. It was actually with the railroads and going into the industrial era. And that's what we hear so much about, this economic transition in this region. So it is somewhat of this back to the future, but really being cognizant of what are the community needs now, and what is that environment they're working in, and with the other actors. Yes, Ron.
Before I mention a couple of needs and ideas, one is I appreciate the values you have on service, because I'm a part of this institution because my boys are dyslexic and they were served, and my wife was a volunteer, one of the tutors. And when she was diagnosed with cancer, she thought she just had a few months to live. We were blessed with 6 years. But she wanted to volunteer in the dyslexia program. So when you start that, every day I get up, I think, oh my goodness, if I only had this day or a few more days to live, would I want to do that type of service? So I think the service that this institution inspires is very important. I'm working with about 14 counties on the grassroots level. A major problem that we have is leadership. And I know the Brushy Fork tries to do some stuff, and there's other type of leadership, but there's no consistent leadership development programs. This might come into where this is a meeting place, a gathering place, but for us to respond to the changing economy and needs of our region, there needs to be a comprehensive, formal servant leadership type of program. The other thing with the school districts I'm working with, there's a major epidemic, and this deals in with the youth, of child abuse, more so child neglect, and a lot of your school people will call it an epidemic. And then, of course, we know whenever we have loss of jobs and all that, that creates greater stresses. So this whole issue of working with that forgotten problem, and maybe a lot of times we don't see it, but it impacts people's lives.
There's hidden problems.
Well, child poverty.
Yeah. Now we're getting some hands. Good. Jill.
I was just curious in regards to phase 2, the gender-specific piece of that. If I was understanding that correctly, I'm assuming it's because males had a significantly lower rate of success in high school. But I was curious as to what the gap was between male to female ratio there to justify kind of excluding the females.
60%, I think that some of the studies, the ones that were around that lower percent, it's like 60% of the females, it was the Eastern one too, and it's not just one study. 60% of the women were succeeding, and it was down like in the teens of men. It's this difference was jaw-dropping. I was surprised too. It's like, well, a program just for men, But it was specifically in that, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about that or to Ron.
The studies, the research replicates itself over and over. The statistics show an enormous gap that, and we anticipated those questions, but why not? Why just guys? But we really believe that there is a huge issue that's impacting not just guys and their ability to work, but their families and just long-term support in the region, where girls are more successfully being educated, completing college, landing successful jobs it's an issue.
Very astonishing. But one of the points that Ron made about leadership was it is, you know, even Eastern Kentucky leadership or Kentucky leadership is holding none of their meetings in Eastern Kentucky, and they haven't in the last year or so. So that is definitely, it's very worrisome. So the leadership that's, you know, what's happening, and there's a lot of political reasons why, because it costs money, and the ones that have the companies that have the money are, you know, more over in the West. But they should be here, and that's where some advocacy is in. But I was really impressed, and I'm going to tell Corey, who's texting right now, I was very impressed in the meeting where he said, no, not about your texting, but the values of one of the values in there of excellence, those values are hidden like they have a whole phrase for that. When he said this, and I was like, you know, sometimes the mouth of babes almost, but he was saying, we're going to be modeled, we're going to be leaders in everything we do. And I remember you quoted something for me, and I just was so impressed because it was, this concept of excellence was directly related with showing that in leadership. And that's in that values that they have there that you can't really see all the text behind it. But that is a really critical part. And you see it reflected in some of the language where they're talking about models and replicating. But it is really trying to do that, and it is some of this, it will have to be some advocacies in some of the other areas. Because it's the two-pager and the short presentation can't capture so much richness. Yes, Izzy?
I have a question about diversity and inclusion. I feel like the main section that I heard diversity discussed was in the institutional advancement part of the plan, in terms of the board and the financial stream. But I'm curious, especially about the programming, what plans the school has to protect and promote diversity.
Probably I would ask some programs people, but then also to make sure when we were talking about diversity, we said we were talking, at least when we were in general terms, diversity can mean age, it can mean gender, it can mean socioeconomic class, it can mean race, religion, all these things. So we're gonna talk about diversity in that sense. As a program, Brett, you want to speak to that, and I can also say a few words. I am only the facilitator. I was very privileged to learn so much about Hindman, but I can't speak for them. So I'll try to.
Again, more and more we're trying to, in an effort to bring to the surface just kind of the diversity and influences in mountain culture. To date, we are trying to showcase that as much as possible. So in doing projects like heritage food and dance trails, we do want to look at not just sort of the commercial ideas of hillbillies dancing and playing banjos and fiddles, but go much deeper than that. I mean, in that sense, yes. And could you speak to that?
Well, in general, I know we had some conversation that in general, the region isn't that diverse in almost any of those categories I talked about. So you're dealing with not a highlight, very homogeneous in many ways. I'm generalizing. Please take that, I'm generalizing it. So, but we recognize that we do want to be proactive. It was talked about for the board, again, as leadership, because it can show that. But saying then we have to be very proactive and saying we're going to have to target that because it's not just going to happen, because we're going to have to very much be really target that to get that type of diversity, because that diversity brings those different perspectives in, and diversity has shown over and over brings your innovation, brings new ideas. That's what really Hindman wants. That wants to be constantly helping to percolate those type of ideas to meet the different needs. Brett.
And yeah, and I will say that constantly in working on promoting cultural heritage of the region, we are continuing to, as I mentioned, dig much deeper than just the surface and say like, okay, the banjo, what is the idea that people have with the banjos? There's a tremendous amount of influence. It's an African instrument for that matter. How many people know that about the history of the banjo? So just through that lens, trying to display the diversity of even that, but also, as we mentioned, bring all of this more to a contemporary idea of where we are now and what is our culture, who are
to come up with ideas and help with the strategy. So that's always open. If you have good ideas, Lois, you had a question or comment?
Well, we're working on a concept in discussing dyslexia, and it really is all about neural diversity. It's the way different brains are constructed genetically, and they're here in the mountains. These are brains that come up with different ideas, they're creative, they're problem solvers. This is neural diversity. The kids all sort of have the same color, but they have different ages, they have different genders, they come from different communities. And so from that perspective, the dyslexia program really does foster a diversity.
I'm not seeing questions from this side. I did see somebody scratch their head. It's like an auction. You might get called on. So go ahead.
I'm sitting here thinking that I'm hearing different things.
Okay.
I'm hearing, let's work together. Maybe Apple Shop, the activities in Hayden and Hindman, and here, and at the same time, people need money and they're going to try to enrich their programs itself, and the money's not here. The money's in New York City. So the fundraising has to be aimed at where the money is and to tell a story. The other thing I heard was lack of leadership, which is something that we've talked about for 50 years. You know, we have the, what's it called, Ron, the program that meets, is it every other year from one part of the
East Kentucky leadership.
East Kentucky leadership? If there was a way to make that a permanent part of what we're talking about here in terms of building leadership into it, at least the ongoing idea that the politicians come and go, but the problems remain.
Yeah.
So funding, leadership, and teamwork seem to be the goals. And then the question is, how do you bring them all together?
Well, leadership, you know, you have Alice Lloyd said the leaders are here. I attended Berea College, and that was instilled in me. I didn't realize it, but that you're supposed to come back to your region and make a difference. Our challenge has been, Knott County used to have a leadership development program. A lot of these counties had, at one time we had a lot of leadership and county programs, and then they've gone away. And so that type of grassroots leadership development is very important.
Well, the tagline is meeting unmet needs, and that was definitely identified as one. But yeah, you hit on it. I don't know if Josh wanted to speak. Might be too soon about, you know, this whole funding. I mean, some of those collaborations are not always as obvious, but there are, for example, the Scholars Program, I think, is also Pine Mountain. He mentioned the Hindman Scholars Program, but that's not just Hindman, it's also Pine Mountain. At least has been in some preliminary talks. That's through the Berea College. So some of it, what was presented, was just from the Hindman perspective, but there's partners and collaboration involved in it. But Josh, do you feel comfortable? Or is it too early?
It is very early. We're about a month in, but we're just at a stage now just to start evaluating before we can do those kind of outreach events, how we are going to diversify our funding streams. And so I think we're in a really good place to move forward. I think as far as increasing our annual fund, growing the endowment, and I feel very good about the place that we're in. I don't have specifics really to share, but I think we're in a really good place right now.
How about for those community members? Does it feel like this, I mean, Hyman Settlement School's purpose is to serve the community. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but does anybody have anything, does this resonate, or is there, you know, you already mentioned some areas that you felt were unmet. I know in interviews, some very huge issues came out, drugs and things came out in the issues, you know, and those are things that are in the community are just, you know, are causing problems. So does anybody in the community feel comfortable, that identify themselves as a community member? I'm sorry, everybody here is probably our greater community. We also had some good discussions on that. Who's your community? Or do you want to write it on a note paper? Too late in the evening, so. Nods? Okay, well, please don't forever hold your peace. Hyman Settlement School is here, so did you have great, I appreciate it, thank you.
All the problems
I'm working it.
we talked about, I mean, I think they're the same problems that have been talked about for time immemorial.
Yeah.
Diversity, economic growth, we've got children we need to educate. The problem we've consistently had is making sure this community works with that community, works with this community. Not everybody invents the wheel at the same time because it depletes all our resources. And one of the encouraging things for me as a member of this community has been to see the workings between what's happened here in Hyman. The settlement school working with this program, working with that program, and reaching out. And I would hope that people who think we have lack of leadership or people who think we have lacks of diversity can get past those blinders and quit talking about problems and start talking about solutions. Because we can list all our problems all day long. It doesn't matter until we actually start acting upon what that problem is. It's never going to change. I think that's what's held us back for so long. Of course, that's just my opinion.
No, I hear your frustration, and I think I also heard though the positive side. You've seen some movement on that, but that's a definite charge for Hyman Settlement School and other organizations. You need to work together. So, but yes, it's focusing on the solutions. Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll just I'll turn it back over to. Go ahead.
I'd just like to speak to that as a staff member and a community member both. I like that kind of strategy of thinking, in that it takes a really long time for an individual or a community or an organization such as ours to see a lot of progress. You're stuck in the moment, you want to see immediate results, but really when you look back in hindsight, you see, wow, we did a lot. And I think that that's something that Settlement School has done for a long time. And I think as we focus on education, focus on cultural heritage, focus on all the things that Brent spoke to, I think in time we're going to see that a lot of issues solve themselves because we create a place and we contribute to a region that people will want to come to and will want to be a part of. People who are already here will want to be active. It will be a place that is comfortable for people to come in from wherever they are. It already is in a lot of ways, and as we go forward with this, I think that's where we're going to see exceedingly. And so you just have to have a little faith.
I like that. I was going to say we can close on it.
It's a comment. I'd like to second what Carrie says from the perspective of an Eastern Kentucky, which is really struggling at the moment. People are confused, scared, wondering what the future holds. There's so much negative energy running around our country at this point. And I see my experience with the settlement school in the past has been this is a place of joy. At least, I mean, I haven't been in really bad times, I suppose, but in this plan, to see so many points where people can, if things go well, come together and, number one, enjoy each other, and number two, build the community in the spiritual sense as well as in acquiring skills or eating a good meal or something. I think that's a kind of underlying theme that is very important going forward.
Learn from one another. The original words, right? So, yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
I guess just a question is, does the settlement school then provide a forum for people with different viewpoints, as an outsider coming into the community? It's very obvious, I see what you've alluded to, of people not working together, different factions in the community. And I guess I see the settlement school as a forum, as a place where people can come together, as Rich was saying, and agree to disagree, and for the betterment of all. And I guess in the planning of this, is that there? Is that part of this 5-year plan? That this is a place of encouragement of different people in the community to come together and agree to disagree and work together. Is that even?
For me, it's kind of almost so in implicit that, I mean, it's an assumption, but it might need to be more explicit. I mean, a foundation of that, you know, we talked a lot about that. You know, this is that kind of the, glue, the, you know, whatever you want to call it, but where people can come together, because that was the original settlement idea too.
Well, it was like alluded to, how do you get people to come across the country?
Um,
How do you get community people to walk across the country?
By having a value proposition, make it worth it. It's got to be worth their, you know, their time. It's their time to come across. So, I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that or we'd close with that, but yes, I would.
I'll respond briefly to that. I do agree with Amy. I feel like it's inherent to settlement school life. I've never sat at a table that's related to anything Hindman that everybody sat there and just agreed and it was happy. It wasn't discord, but at the same time there was a diversity of belief and different opinions about how we move forward, but always a sense of moving forward. And I feel like if we can maintain that idea of moving forward, being productive, providing meaningful opportunities for people to grow, for families to grow, for our community to heal and move forward in whatever ways it needs to, this is a place where that can happen. And I feel like we welcome that just by the nature of being a settlement school. And certainly that's a renewed mission, at least in my mind. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Certainly this is a snapshot of what we plan to do. You're here for different reasons. Many of you are here because you love the settlement school. You're here because you're curious. You're here because you want to root us on toward what's next. Maybe we have an opportunity to be partners. Maybe we have an opportunity to work together in different ways. But I think tonight, as we talk about this plan, know that, like Amy said at the beginning, it is a fluid document. We welcome your feedback and comments. If you have things that you wrote on your cards, please make sure you get those to Amy before you leave. There is an envelope in your chair. I don't want to do a major financial ask tonight, but I do want you to understand that the work we do relies on the partnership and investment of people like you. And so whether you can give $500 or $500 today, next week, next month, please become a partner with Hindman Settlement School, whatever that looks like for you. We have an opportunity for you to be a part of what we call a Fidelity Club, which is a monthly gift opportunity. Some people give $5 a month, some people give more than that, but it's an opportunity to invest in this work and to keep things moving forward. And this envelope, whether you take it with you or leave it tonight with a little something in it, it's an opportunity for you to be part of that work. So let me thank you again for coming. We are so appreciative of your time tonight. We hope you enjoyed dinner. We hope you enjoyed this time. Talk back to us as you feel like you can. Thank you for being here. Well, good evening, everybody. It looks like we've got a Baptist crowd. You all are in the back of the room. That's all right. That's all right. I want to welcome you to the Hindman Settlement School. My name is Brent Hutchinson, and I'm the executive director here. And we tonight want to have a discussion with you about what our next 5 years we think look like. So what we plan to do this evening is give you an overview of our process, what we've been going through for really about the last 12 months. And then we're going to spend some time thinking about the next 5 years together. So we're going to present the plan that we have, and then we want you to talk back to us. What do you think? What's not there that should be? Does anything not make sense? Is something confusing? So we'll have some time to do that. As we get started, I want to introduce to you Amy Russillo, who has been our strategic planning consultant for this last year. Many of you spoke with Amy through the process. She was the person who did a lot of personal interviews and worked our process with us in terms of kind of culling information and getting us to the place where we are today. So I want to introduce Amy to you and then let her have a chance to talk to you a little bit more about that process, and then we'll get into the presentation from there. Thank you.
But I am going to pass these out because Brent's going to talk about the strategic planning process, and then we're going to have some Q&A in the end. But we are a larger group, as well as I know sometimes some people feel not as comfortable maybe speaking up, and so you want to ask a question, but you aren't really comfortable asking it. So there's pens around the room too. So what I would encourage you, as he's presenting and such, if you want to write down a question, or if you have a thought, or you hear something really interesting you want to comment on later, go ahead and write it down. And then I can collect those, and so ones we can't get to, we can make sure that we also still take that under consideration, as well as we can see, you can still ask your question in the group too, so no problem in that. But that will give you a chance as well to just, if you want to think about it, particularly as sometimes you hear something at the beginning of a presentation, and by the end, maybe you've forgotten about it, so you can just jot it down. So I'm going to go ahead and pass out some of these, and you can just pass them down. So as Brent said, we started this process about a year ago, and the first thing we do is kind of say, are you ready? Because a lot of people say, oh yeah, we want to do a plan, but it's kind of like, are you ready for that? So Brent did this, gave him a checklist, and he filled out his checklist of kind of his readiness. I think that has some more of these. And then we did a survey with all the board members and the staff, and we asked them about getting their input on what they thought about the strengths of the organization, some of the opportunities and the challenges. And so that was with an online survey, so it wasn't a one-on-one. Used that and synthesized that, and we came together then in May, so at a board meeting we talked about that. And looked at some of that together, and use that then as a launching pad for then one-on-one interviews to get into a little bit deeper on those topics. And it was really a really interesting snowball effect, because somebody would say, you really need to talk to this person. And a lot of these community members are people that had been involved in the past. And ended up doing about 70 interviews. And brought that together again then in October. We had a meeting, we came together with the board and staff. And we talked about that for like 2 days in some different locations. And it was really, personally, I was very, very privileged to be part of the process. It was really interesting what was coming out. It was a lot of work. It's synthesized in a 2-pager, but this does not reflect a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of the discussion. Because as we first started out on it, I kept telling people, it's not that piece of paper at the end, it's that process. And that's what I think the Hindman Settlement School really exemplified. The process of developing the strategic plan gave them a reason and to talk about what their mission is, to really think hard about it, to really reflect. Is this really, are we doing what we really should be doing, and what does the community outside think we should be doing, and kind of aligning those. So it took really a year, not just a constant work. There was times we took a step back, reflected. But it was, I would have to say thank you to Brent, and also to many of the community members. Some of them are here that I got to talk to. I ended up learning so much about the region. I'm not from around here, and about the people and the staff, just all the hard work, board members, many of them are here in the room. And just, you'll hear now a little bit about what that journey has then culminated in. And as Brent said, it's not, it's not to have a final product, it's a living document, and that's why it's really important. If you look at the mission statement, it's about being part of this community. So having what your thoughts and reflection on that is really important, so your perspectives. So feel free to write that on the card if you want. You don't need to, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. Thanks.
Projector timed out on us there, but that's okay. Just a couple things as we get into the presentation. Like Amy mentioned, there is a 2-page handout on your chair that gives you really a thumbnail sketch of what our 5-year plan looks like. And it kind of hits highlights without a lot of detail. I'm going to try to provide some detail, albeit fairly quickly. If you have questions, that's what your note cards are for. Certainly if you have things that you want to ask after I'm finished presenting, feel free to do that. We want you to be able to ask those questions. Really what we're looking for tonight is your feedback. Do things seem confusing? Is there something that you feel like we may be needing to address maybe a little more than we've discussed? By no means is everything we do captured in this next 5-year plan. What we really wanted to highlight were things that are changing for us. If we've been doing programs for a long time, chances are we're probably still going to be doing that. So we're not really kind of going through the things we've always done. That's, I think, accepted foundation for us. We plan to continue to do things that way. So a lack of mention does not mean that's changed. What we want to talk about is how we're enhancing things that we're already doing, what we're adding, what we're changing. And that's really what the process will be as we go from here. Let me get that back a little bit. So tonight, let's talk about talking about our mission. The Settlement School's mission is to provide education and service opportunities for people of the mountains while keeping them mindful of their heritage. It's been our mission for many, many years. Many of you know the Settlement School was founded in 1902. Our mission has remained the same that entire time. Our vision, while the mission has remained the same for over 100 years, the Settlements program will adjust over time to meet the changing needs of the community and region. One of the things that I think I'm personally so thankful for that our founders did was to say that we would do something for a time, and then whenever someone else came into the community to provide similar work or that sort of work, we would pass that off to them, and then we would do something that nobody else was doing so that we could continue to meet vital, crucial needs that are happening here in the community. And that continues to be the vision that we have for the work that we plan to do in the next 5 years. One of the things that emerged during our process were institutional values. We'd never really articulated a set of core values or things that we felt like were a lens that we could see everything through. And I think that this was a helpful thing for us to realize, is that we really have commitments to 5 things that everything we do kind of goes through. One of those is place. We're committed to this place. We're committed to service and being servants and looking at the community in that way. We're committed to relationships, whether it be constituents that we serve who come onto our campus or the relationships that we have throughout the region, whatever they may be, partnerships, collaboration, that sort of thing. But we're committed to relationships. We're committed to doing everything we do with excellence. We don't want to kind of half do anything. We want to make sure that we're fully invested and do the absolute best we can. And then finally, we're committed to results. We want to make sure that the time we spend doing this critical work actually makes a difference. And so we plan to not only look at what we're doing, but to measure it and evaluate it in a way that perhaps we never have. And I think that's going to be a key to the future as we think about a plan from 2021 and beyond. 3 sorts of areas of focus for service and development emerged during our process as well. So the rest of the time that I'm going to spend presenting is to discuss these 3 areas. Again, sort of a lens that we see what the work we do through. One is that we will meet changing needs, and that's been our vision really from the beginning. But how do we do that today? What does that look like in the 21st century? And as we think about differences in leadership, different people who are at the table, different opportunities and challenges in our community, how do we meet the changing needs that have emerged? Cultural heritage has been a part of the work we've been doing from the beginning. We want to keep people here mindful of their heritage, but does that mean that we really just focus on traditional sorts of things, or do we look at what's happening today and begin to enhance that with the work that we have from the past? How does our history inform our present and our future? And then the third thing is institutional advancement, and that takes on a couple of different forms that we'll talk about. Certainly one of those is kind of our physical plan, our capital plan, but also how we deal with the endowment that we have, how we deal with an annual fund, and how we want to think about the future through those helps that we have. So first, we're going to discuss meeting our changing needs. Our goals are rather broad: to ensure access to people here in our community to knowledge, skills, and dispositions to thrive in a global society. Our second goal is to proactively identify and respond to changing needs in the region. We've got to have our thumb on everything that happens around here. We've got to be in the know on the way things are developing in Central Appalachia. It's critical for us to understand the context of the world in which we serve. It's not good enough for us to rely on just the past and the things we've always been doing. We have to be mindful of the way that things are trending, the way things are changing. One of the chief aspects that we've been focused on from the beginning is our work with children. So here are some things that we want to do in terms of that. And again, some of this I'll try to highlight with a little more detail as I discuss. We want to strengthen the impact and regional access to our dyslexia program. If you're not aware of that program now, we have a reading lab program that meets in the local schools in Knott County. Not all of them, but several of them. And we work every day with students for at least 30 minutes in intervention. Those students have been identified as having dyslexic characteristics or some sort of reading challenge. 7 years ago, at that point in time, we had a full-time school on our campus. We made a transition at that time to go into the public schools and to do this reading lab program, and it tripled our reach. Instead of seeing 50 students every day, we saw around 165 students, and that's our current number today. So we're proud of that. We want to continue to do that. If you look at the very bottom of that, we do hope to expand the Reading Lab program into all the elementary schools in our county. That's a way for us to be hyper-local. Some of the things we do expand throughout the region, but the Reading Lab program, at least as it is today, is a Knott County program, and it's something that we're proud of. It's something that we believe makes a difference. It's a loose correlation. We've not done the actual study on it, but we know that the schools we're serving have higher reading scores than the schools we're not serving. And that was not the case before we started serving there. So, there are lots of factors that make that be, but it's one of the things that we know has happened, and we want to make sure that we measure that a little more closely and do that as well. In addition to our Reading Lab program, we have a summer tutoring program that lasts 5 weeks. It makes a mountain of difference in kids' lives. We know that in that 5-week program, those students receive at least on average a year's reading gain. So 5 weeks translate to an entire year's reading gain for them. It's a residential program for students from outside the local area. We're happy to be able to be serving students from around the country. We already know that this summer we've got 2 coming from out of state and maybe more. We've really just now put out the call for people to start being interested, and so we love being able to do that. We have an after-school program that meets in 4 local counties that looks to expand, and we hope to be able to do that. That's an easily replicable program, and so we want to be able to do that wherever there's a need and wherever we have trained volunteers who are able to take that on, a good critical mass of kids to be able to do that. And then we do screening and evaluation services. One of the moves that we've recently made is to contract with a local psychologist who will actually be able to work with kids and actually say that they have dyslexia. And that's a huge gain for those kids in terms of the types of resources that are then provided to them because of that diagnosis, as well as the opportunity for them to have significant 504 plans in their public schools that psychologist can sign off on and say, this kid needs this in order to be able to succeed academically. We can make recommendations. That matters. We've always kind of done that, but having that psychologist sign off on that is really a totally different world. And so we're real excited about that and are implementing that as we speak. So we do want to partner with people to do that. The second point is to advocate on state level initiatives in dyslexia education and inclusion in teacher prep programs. The House passed a bill a few years ago to deal with the dyslexia a little bit more head on than they had in the past. It's not been the most successful initiative the Department of Education has taken on. We believe it can be stronger. We're going to work with partners to be able to do that, and so some of our work will shift toward advocacy in a way that we've never really done. We also know that in order for that to really take effect in classrooms, teachers who are being trained in colleges have to learn how to work with dyslexic students. And so we hope to be part of that process as well and be able to work in teacher prep programs across Kentucky to be able to do that. We want to do a longitudinal analysis of our alumni. We have records going back to 1979 whenever our program started. We've never really evaluated it. We don't really know what the outcomes for some of these people are. What we know is anecdotal. And so we want to crunch those numbers. We want to sit down with those people and gather that information to make sure that we know what's been working for people, how they've been successful or not in adult life, and figure out how that implicates our program as we go forward. We think that's going to be a very important part of our process. One of the things that we are really excited about is the opportunity to advance early childhood initiatives. We know that in our county and in our area, there is a higher prevalence of students with dyslexia than there might be in the general population. What we did this past year was to work in one of our local elementary schools to begin to determine how many of the rising kindergartners in that school were going to struggle with reading. The reason we wanted to do that was because that told us how many kids we needed to work with in order to prevent reading failure before it happened. That's critical. And what we found is that there was a very high percentage of those kids. I think we screened somewhere around 43 students. 17 or 18 of them showed signs of dyslexia. That's a really high percentage. It's more than 20%. It's actually closer to 50%. And so if that's the case in that school, what is it in the other schools? And how can we get into those kids' lives and those families' lives and teaching them how to work with their children so that they don't experience reading failure, so that we're not dealing with them in 3rd grade and they're not ready to go on to 4th grade because they can't read yet. We want to try to prevent that as much as possible. In addition to that early childhood initiative, we want to expand that across the county, but we also are thinking about the possibility of doing doing a day program for students who are kind of late preschool, ready to enter school. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but that's an idea that we have that we hope to be able to dig up some more research on and figure out how best that might be implemented at Hindman Settlement School. You know, in our history, we used to do a Montessori school, and something like this kind of harkens back to that time. And so we're thinking about that world and what that might look for us as well. And then I mentioned before to expand the Reading Lab program. In working with youth, we have several different opportunities here that we think are very exciting and some things that we've been focused on for a while. Our board of directors has been in the know on this for some time, and so I want to talk a little bit about it tonight. The first issue is to advance the Hindman Scholars Program. And that's an idea we've been toying around with for the last couple of years. But we know that in our area, southeastern Kentucky, we have a problem with young men graduating from high school and being successful in their post-high school life, whether it be being able to get a job that they can hold, that they can accomplish something in, or whether it be going on to college and being successful completing college, 2-year program, 4-year program, whatever it might be. For example, at Eastern Kentucky University, we know that the average retention rate from freshman to sophomore year for boys who come from our area is only 37%. That's incredibly low. Berea College, by contrast, which Berea is a different animal than Eastern Kentucky University, but by contrast, they have somewhere around a 90% retention rate for young men from the freshman to sophomore year. So there's an issue there that just in that one example, we already can see a problem. We want to step into these guys' lives and figure out how can we really make a difference in their lives so that they can succeed beyond that. So the Hindman Scholars Program really is a 2-phase program. Phase 1 will see us going into local schools and working with students as they transition from 8th to 9th grade and helping them figure out how to make the best choices possible that they can make. That sounds fairly simple, but they're not being taught that anymore, number one. They're not really taught how to critically think. They're not taught how to make great choices, and as they get older, the choices they make have more impact and more meaning. What we hope to do is in that transition time from middle school to high school is to really get their attention and help them from the outset begin to make good decisions so that later on when they are ready to graduate high school, they really kind of have an idea of what their path is going to look like. Statistically speaking, we know that the program we want to use makes an enormous difference in lives. We know that teenage pregnancy rates drop. We know that high school completion rates increase. We know that the opportunity for students to go on and succeed in a trade school, a 2-year or a 4-year academic program skyrockets. We believe that the program we want to look at will make a huge difference in those lives. So our early proposal is to work in Knott County as well as 2 counties in the Promise Zone, which are just outside of Knott County, a little bit to our west. And we're still identifying what those counties are, but there's a good chance we'll be doing that this fall, going into those schools and doing an intervention program for that transition from middle school to high school. Phase 2 of the program would be an on-campus residential experience for these 4 young men. So let me back up. Phase 1 is for guys and girls. Phase 2, at this point in time, is a guys program that would either be a gap year program or a senior year in high school plus gap year between high school and college year for young men to come and live on our campus, and they would receive remediation in academic areas where they struggle. We know that the guys who go to college from our area, at least our universities are telling us, they struggle with reading and they struggle with quantitative skill. How can we remediate that and make a difference? How can we get them ready for college before they actually go and fail? So we want to spend some time kind of brushing up on the things they don't quite have yet. They'll also live on campus and live in community with one another. They'll work on campus, so there's a work component. There's a soft skills training component to that. So those students who are with us would receive training in leadership, professionalism, citizenship, the things that it takes to really succeed in life, to do well in life, whatever endeavor they choose, but really spend a year pouring into them. And the ultimate hope is that whenever they complete our program after being here for about 10 months and they go on to whatever's next for them, college, trade school, whatever it might be, that we have partners that partner with us in order to provide tuition free to them so they can go to college without that hindrance. And we're excited about that program and have already begun discussing that. So that will bring life back to the campus in a way that it's really not been here for some time throughout the year, and we look forward to being able to do that. The next section talks about articulating a model, the Hindman Settlement School way, aimed at helping students grow into their best selves. That's pretty philosophical in nature, but more than anything, it helps us to identify what these things that we really want to impart on the kids that we come in contact. What do we want to teach them? What do we want to learn from them that we can then incorporate maybe a better path, maybe a path that's a little more refined or a path that's got a little more emphasis on the things that are really going to matter for them. We want to figure out what that looks like. In many ways, if you're thinking the things I'm talking about sound like old settlement school ways, they really are. in a lot of ways, what we want to do is get back to a pretty original, traditional settlement model that comes into an area and really begins to address the things that have emerged at that time. And so that will begin to articulate what this Hindman Settlement School way is. The third thing is something we're pretty excited about too. It's to relaunch a contemporary Alcor program throughout the region during the summer months. Alice Lloyd College many years ago had students who would commit their summers to going into local communities and to basically provide summer camp to residents in those communities. We want to do that again. We want to have a troop of students who come here and live for the summer or live in the region for the summer that we train, and they go into local communities and provide academic bridges to kids so that they don't begin to fall back in the summer. We certainly know we have skills that we can offer in terms of reading in particular, but also some other things that our students can be trained in and have the chance to really go into these communities and make a difference in kids' lives in that time, and also recreational opportunities for them so that the prevalence of risky behavior begins to drop, the opportunity for them to advance educationally is not lost in the summer months. And so it provides a summer camp experience really for kids throughout the region, but also for staffers to come in that we have our hands on, are able to pour into and have an incredible summer experience working in communities all throughout our region. So we're excited about that too. How do we do this? One is to create models for replication across the region. Two is to provide 3 E's, education, experience, and expertise. And 3 is to launch a new initiatives fund and drive to assist in the implementation of settlement work expansion. We believe that people who are supporters and friends of Hindman Settlement School have always gotten behind the work we've done, and they have an opportunity to get behind new work. And so we want to give them that opportunity and also utilize the resources that are provided to us and have been provided to us for many years to be able to make these kinds of new differences. We'll talk a little bit more about that during institutional advancement. The next section deals with cultural heritage. 2 goals. The Settlement School seeks to enrich lives through access and participation in cultural heritage programs. We're already doing that. How can we do that better? How can we do that more? And secondly, Hindman Settlement School will more firmly establish itself as a regional leader in arts and culture. The Settlement School has always been a gathering place for people. There are many people who come here to learn, and they take that wherever they live, and they do things with that. How can we do that more? How can we better resource and equip people who are already working in this cultural heritage areas, whatever they might be? How can we be a resource for them? And how can we provide opportunities, not just for them, outsiders, but for people who are here in this community to understand the heritage they've had, but also to really celebrate the heritage we have going on today? And what does that look like in a contemporary time? We have a few strategies to do that. One is to form new partnerships and strengthen existing ones. So I've said from the beginning of my time here, it's been important to me to be a collaborator and a team builder and a partner. We don't believe the Settlement School has all the answers. There are other people who have those. And so where other people are doing good work, we'd love to be part of that. Where we're doing good work, we'd love for other people to be a part of that. And so it's really a two-way street, and we want to be able to enhance that as best we can. We want to develop a more intentional and formal curricula for cross-program activities. So we have folk arts programs that meet in the local schools and provide the art education our elementary students get. In time, there's going to be a need to have that really written down and replicated and being able to be transmitted throughout the region, because what we have is so critical. How can we do that curriculum well? We want to be able to figure that out. The third is to work with local partners to develop a heritage food and dance trail throughout southeastern Kentucky. And you're going to see more about that over the next year, but that's something that there's already some momentum behind. We know there's a rich heritage throughout our region for both food and dance. How can we highlight that? And how can we make a difference in lives by bringing people to the region to learn more about that? So in some ways that becomes a tourism and an economic driver, really just by us celebrating our heritage. And we want to be able to do that well. The fourth is to increase events and offerings for community members at the school. We've really been doing that for about 3 years with the inclusion of Grow Appalachia. Last year, we began a new event, Dumplings of Dancing, that had people here to learn more about those foodways and those dance traditions. And we're going to do more things like that. So that's really what that points toward. How do we do these things? We do them by initiating and cultivating partnerships within the region to promulgate similarly minded outcomes toward flourishing within place. That's a long-winded way of saying we want people to love where they live. And we want to help them figure out how they do that. There are a lot of people who like things about where they live, but they think they can't have a life here. They think they can't thrive and flourish here. We don't believe that's true. And so we want to make sure that people understand what that could look like for them and how they can be a part of making it different for other people. The second is to capture relevant data in an effort to expand what it means to keep people mindful of their heritage in contemporary user-friendly interfaces. The programs we do, whether it be an event or some sort of arts program or curriculum development, we want to make sure that people have access to it. We want to make sure it makes sense to them, and we want to make sure they're able to use it well and that it actually makes a difference for them. And the third is to provide impact events which draw people to the settlement campus, create settlement fans in distant places, and create community and interconstituent relationships to extend heritage causes and innovation. The events that we have draw people from really all around the country. They come here to Hindman for a week at a time or a weekend at a time, learn something, become fans of Hindman, talk about us around the country, and really they begin to bring their friends back to here. One of the things that's missing, though, are people who live right here coming across that bridge and being a part of the same things. We want to change that. It's for no lack of our trying to do that, but the more the message is out there, the more inclusion is stressed, we believe that it can make a difference. And so that's something that we really intend to do as best we can. And finally, institutional advancement. This has different components. 4 goals here. Number 1 is to maintain a diverse board and strong board governance. We have an incredible, fully functioning board and have had for some time. We have a 20-member board and an advisory board that's non-voting, but they have ample voice in the work that we do. And so we want to make sure that that board maintains itself as strong in all the ways they can. We want to build a more sustainable and diversified finance stream for operational use. I'll get to that in a minute. The third is to promote a well-recognized brand in the region and beyond. We've done a lot of work toward branding in the last several years. There's more work to be done. We're really thrilled that Josh Mullins is here as our Director of Advancement. He understands that well, and so we're on a great track to do that. And then finally, to equip and fit the campus for growth and longevity through planned maintenance, renovation, and as needed, new construction. The first section to talk about is financial development. The first thing we want to do is to diversify our donor base. The settlement school really functions quite differently than a lot of other organizations. We have a number of constituents who are supporters of the school. We have a set of alumni who graduated from the settlement school or Hindman High School. They lived here. The settlement school touched their lives in significant ways. Our most recent class, though, graduated in the middle 1970s. And so we've got some work to do in terms of building that alumni database of people and building relationships with the people who are still invested in the work locally here in Hindman and at the settlement school. The second is to build stronger relationships with alumni through annual and planned giving. As much as we have a strong alumni base, they don't give a lot to the settlement school. But we do believe that people desire to leave a legacy with the funds and the work that they've done, and we believe the settlement school is a great place for them to do that. So in order for us to do that, we've got to get in front of them and talk about those opportunities, and so we plan to do that. The third is to develop a planned giving strategy. There are a lot of people, again, who like to leave a legacy to places they believe in. For us, we believe the settlement school has a 113-year history that speaks for itself, but they may not know how they connect to it, and so we want to provide that opportunity for them. The next item is to increase endowment contributions by 5% each year. So what we plan to do is to look at where our specific endowment contributions have been over the last several years and to begin to slowly and incrementally increase that. We want to point people toward giving specifically to the endowment and not necessarily just to the annual fund. We need annual fund help, but we need endowment fund help too. The next is to develop a foundation board to direct the activity of the endowment. Right now, our current board oversees the activity of the endowment through money managers who work with us on that, and we have an investment committee as a part of our board who works with that. It may very well be that that investment committee becomes a foundation board, but we want to utilize them to not just kind of oversee what happens, but to work actively to increase giving to the endowment and to really kind of take ownership in the development of the long-term life of the settlement school. The next thing is to increase our annual fund to $1.6 million in 2 years, and then within 5 years, $2 million. Our current annual budget for the settlement school is $1.437 million. So within 2 years, we want to increase that to about $150,000, and then within 5 years up to $2 million. We believe that at $2 million, all the things we're talking about today will be fully functioning. And so those are goals for us. And those are lofty goals, but those are goals for us. The next one is to decrease the dependence on our endowment for operating expenses by 0.5% over 5 years. Part of the operating budget for the settlement school comes from an endowment draw. Many nonprofit organizations do that. We receive a small portion of endowment interest every year to help build our annual fund expenses or revenue. We want to continue to do that, but we want to begin to decrease that dependence little by little every year, so that within 5 years we're at a place that really there's no risk of eating into the seed corn of the endowment. The rate we draw at now, at about 7 or 8 years, we might begin to do that if nothing really shifts in the market. We don't even want to get to that. So we want to get to the place where we're still drawing from the endowment. That's what it's partially intended to do, but at a safe level where we never really risk the principle of it. We want to add to our development staff over time. Our director of advancement has one person who works with him full time, and that's really it. All of us are involved on our staff. All of us are involved in development work, but how can we really do that better? As this grows, there's no way for 1 or 2 people to do the mountain of work that getting to a $2 million budget would actually be able to do successfully. So we have the chance to potentially add staff over time to help oversee the annual fund drive, major gifts giving, planned giving, and that sort of thing. One of the things that we don't have now that we really need is to create a rainy day fund for immediate use on maintenance and fiscal emergencies. Every time there's a major problem that happens at the settlement school, we dip into our annual fund in order to fix it, and we can't do that. It doesn't make sense for us to do that. It's not a good strategy, and so for us to be able to develop a rainy day fund that kind of renews itself over time is a goal that we have, and we have a plan to do that. And then finally, to initiate quarterly development and outreach events. We have a lot of people who love Hindman Settlement School that don't live in Knott County, and so in order for us to build relationships with them, we need to be out where they are. So we plan to do events quarterly across the state, really throughout the region, and in areas of the country where we have pockets of supporters already. The next area of institutional advancement we plan to focus on is our campus and brand. One is to better plan for use and maintenance of campus facilities. Much of our posture when it comes to campus facilities is reactive as opposed to proactive. Our buildings are old. This building that you're sitting in today was built around 1960. It's the newest building on campus. So we have a lot of old buildings. They serve our purposes really, really well, but we want to be mindful about how to keep them up over time and not just respond to problems. And so we plan to put together a planned maintenance plan for campus. Another is to formally launch the Cornerstone Capital Campaign. I could spend all night talking about what that looks like. Suffice it to say, there are a lot of needs we have on campus today that we need to be raising some money for pretty immediately in order to address those needs. On the table in the back, there are some renderings of what renovations to this building are planned to look like. Ultimately, new offices will go into the basement of this building. There will be some apartments built down there for people to stay in when they come to campus, and then the outer shell of the building will be renovated. So it'll be a nice inviting place as you come across the bridge and see that. Over here where our old office has been, we're now located at the Kentucky School of Craft, but our old administrative offices are in the Fireside Industries building that's been perched here on the hill since the 1950s. That building will be replaced with a gathering place, which will provide more opportunity for people when they come to campus to gather. For example, what we're doing tonight could easily take place in our planned gathering place. The total campaign, in order to do what we want to do with this building, a gathering place, a rainy day fund, and give about $500,000 to endowment, is a $2.5 million campaign. And we've started to raise that kind of quietly. We'll start that a little bit more publicly when we reach half of the cash we need to start doing the renovations that we have. And we hope to be able to break ground maybe sometime this fall in order to start that. And so, again, we invite you to take a look at that. You'll hear more about the capital campaign, and we'd love to invite you to be a part of that in whatever way you feel like you can. The third part of the campus and brand that we want to mention is to leverage communications to better promote outreach and connections. And again, what I said is that we have Josh in place. He's really good at that. He's going to help us figure out how to do that very, very well. The third section here deals with board and governance. One is to develop a board replacement protocol. What we do right now, we identify empty spots on our board and we try to replace them with people who make sense to us at that time. Our protocol system really is pretty solid. We try to approach people who have wisdom, who've done great work, and who may or may not have wealth, but have maybe some connections to it. All nonprofit boards do that, and we have that formula in place. But can we be more proactive in doing that? And so we want to make sure that we're doing that the best we can. The second is to expand our advisory board to include more local community members and more members of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Both are constituents that for us are big fans, but may not necessarily always feel they have the voice they want. And so we want to be able to provide that in some way that we can through the advisory board. The advisory board that we have is a non-voting portion of our board, and we just want to expand it a little bit to include more members from the local community and from the DAR. The final is to develop adequate best practices, policies, and procedures and become a best practices nonprofit as recognized by the Kentucky Nonprofit Network by 2018. We're well on our way to doing that. There are some things that we've got to clean up and tighten up a little bit to be able to do that. But it really puts Hindman in a place where other people look to us and say, how do you do what you do? We want to learn from you. We feel like we have a lot to offer. 113-year history provides a lot to offer. So this just helps to legitimize that in front of people who are looking toward this sort of thing to be able to do that. And it helps us tighten up some of our plans and procedures that we do. How do we do these things? We aggressively reevaluate development strategies and work toward one more focused on growth than maintenance, which is really where we've been. We want to maintain what we do, and so we work toward that. That's a challenge in and of itself, but we believe we've been called to do more, and in order to do that, we've got to focus on growth and not just maintenance. The second is to focus on endowment changes for growth and sustainability. I mentioned what those things were already. The third is to initiate a campaign of long-term care for our campus and facilities that's proactive rather than reactive. And the fourth is to leverage properties and assets for a more assertive presence, programming, and purposeful impact.